Welcome back, folks. This is Authority Live. My name is Graham Brown. This is episode 2. Thank you if you joined us last week on our weekly journey into the world of authority. Every week we'll be looking at different aspects of building authority, building a following, building a tribe. Whether you are doing that in the B2B space, or you're a coach, or you're an author, or you're a startup entrepreneur, whatever it is, if you have the attention of a following, then you are a leader. So how do you do that? What is actually the steps that you take? What doesn't work today? I mean, the days when you used to write one book and you were on authority, or create one corporate video and you were an authority, those have long gone. Today, it's very different. It's much more authentic. It's much more human, and it requires a lot more hustle. So today we're going to look at how that actually works. Today we're actually going to talk about one of my favorite topics, which is tribes. A lot of that is a nod to the author, Seth Godin. I've got a great quote from him coming up very shortly. So Seth Godin, one of the probably leading marketing gurus in the last 20 years, has really defined how we think about marketing and how that's changed. It's no longer about interruption. Seth Godin writes, and I'll read it for you if you're listening to Authority Live on the podcast: tribes, two different things. A crowd is a tribe without a leader. A crowd is a tribe without communication. Most organizations, and this, by the way, this is my own interjection, includes a lot of authors, coaches, entrepreneurs. Most organizations spend their time marketing to the crowd. Smart organizations assemble the tribe. So how do you build your own tribe? How do you create a group of people who really care? How do you create the conversations that matter with the people who care about those conversations? Too much of our marketing career, whether you are a coach, an author, or an entrepreneur, too much of our marketing career really is about trying to be everything to everybody, trying to get the biggest possible market share. Those days are over. You know, really what works today is being something to somebody, not editing or moderating your message. But if you can convert your followers into fans, one person at a time, then that is a great way to build a business. There is a fantastic article, which I think we'll feature later on in the series, 1,000 True Fans, which basically says that if you can build a business with 1,000 fans, even today you can talk about 100 true fans. If you could find 100 true fans, 100 people who really care about your work, whether your work is life coaching or your work is B2B enterprise sales, if you can find 100 people who really care about your work, then that is a fantastic way to build a business. So stop going after the crowd and start finding your fans. Everything else really is detail. To help us unpack the challenge of tribes on this journey, I've invited 3 special guests today who'll be joining us in the studio for Authority Live. I'll read out who the guests are and we'll introduce them one at a time. Mark Ross Smith, who you may know, I certainly know him as Mr. Loyalty. He's established himself and his tribe. He is the key figure in that space. Whenever I think about airline loyalty programs or hospitality loyalty or customer loyalty data, I think about Mark, and I think a lot of business leaders do as well. And that's a really good example of somebody who has defined their niche. He is, if you like, and I hope he doesn't mind me saying this, he is the Red Bull in the soda market. He's the guy that basically said, I'm not going to be a soda brand. I'm going to define my own category and I'm going to lead that category. That's how you define a tribe. So hopefully we're going to learn a lot about how Mark does that, how he actually creates a tribe of followers, people who know who he is and know him as that guy. Because I bet when everybody has a conversation, when anybody asks, do you know anybody that deals with customer loyalty programs or airline data? They go, yeah, you want to speak to this guy, Mark. And that's how a B2B funnel works. So Mark Ross Smith coming up. Then we have Bethany Inez, who is the founder of Splendor, who's built her own tribe or building her own tribe. Really interesting story about that process, that journey unfolding. We're going to learn about her own work, really reinventing herself, building that tribe, finding people who really care about her message. It's a very strong message as well. It's one that is not edited or moderated. How does Bethany build a community around the kind of issues that she talks about? There's everything really in her community that they care about, those issues related to mindset, lifestyle, health, nutrition, people who really care about these issues and want to be part of a group or a community of people who are helping each other and supporting each other on that journey. Lastly, in the studio, joining us, Dan Cockerell, leadership coach and host of the Come Rain or Shine podcast, better known or more earlier in his work known for his 26 years working in the Magic Kingdom, Disney. That's a great brand that's built a tribe of fans. They don't necessarily have followers. They have a lot of fans who really care about their work. He's also written some books about his work, about culture in the Magic Kingdom. So we're going to learn about tribe building today. There's a lot to get through, and we only have 30 minutes to get through it. So it's going to be a fast, action-packed episode. If you enjoy this episode, then please subscribe to Authority Live on YouTube and Spotify. Details coming up in the show notes or on the footer of this screen if you're watching us on the video version of this stream. Let's start at the top, tribes and loyalty. So to answer that question, I'm really pleased in the journey of Authority Live that we have got somebody who really is building himself as an authority from the ground up to the air, 30,000 feet up. Mark Ross Smith, the also better known as Mr. Loyalty, Status Cliff, Status Match. He's that guy. I think we're going to learn something about what really works for individuals in that case, but also what works for brands, airlines, and building tribes and fans and followers. Mark Ross Smith, everybody joining us in the studio. Mark, welcome.
Graham.
Really pleased to have you here. Mr. Loyalty, how do you feel about when people call you Mr. Loyalty? Because that's the kind of name that's stuck in my head, and I think when people talk about you, that's what they know you as.
Well, at least they're not calling me Mrs. Loyalty. Well, because my name is Mark Ross Smith, MRS, so the Mrs. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, to explain that joke. You got yourself out of that one very quickly. Well done. I was actually talking about, following. I'm following you on social media, and I noticed recently, hope you don't mind, I've been creeping you a bit on social media, as I do once in a while. You were on a flight, on an airline, United Airlines flight recently, and you ended up sitting next to, I don't know if this was kind of part of serendipity or part of the master plan. You ended up sitting next to an airline CEO. Just a bit of backstory that Mark's business, you've worked in the airlines a number of years. Now you're an independent consultant. You have a business which consults back to airlines, to hospitality industry, to hotels, financial services even, and helping them really understand about the loyalty challenge, the data regarding loyalty, but also, who those high value customers are. So you ended up sitting next to this airline CEO. How did that conversation go?
Pretty phenomenal, I must say. So this was only a couple of weeks ago. This is a week and a half. This is sort of hot news. I was boarding the aircraft and I sort of saw this gentleman sitting in the seat next to where I was about to sit, and I thought, this guy's familiar. So I got my phone and I trying to take a photo of, which is a bit awkward because once you get a photo, everyone knows you take a photo. Anyway, so I snap a pic, send it to someone else we work with at this other airline. I said, "Is this your boss?" He says, "No, it's the CEO of the airline." I'm like, cool. I'm going to sit next to him for the next 4 hours. And I thought, great, I got a captive sales audience for the next 4 hours. Poor guy. And what followed this was a Denver to Miami flight. It was 4 hours, and we just geeked out. We just talked about airlines and marketing, new ideas, food, catering, all sorts of stuff. Like if this was a first date, it couldn't have gone any. There would be a second date, very,
A
very, very.
bromance.
It was total bromance.
Mark, what would you talk to him about that you wouldn't talk to somebody who's more of a casual observer like me? Like when you say you geeked out, I want to know, like, what did you get into the weeds of airline world about?
So our business specializes in high-value customer acquisition for airlines specifically, and we have worked with this airline before. So he had heard of us, but we'd never met face to face. So we talked about how does he and his airline capture the people that fly more than 2 or 3 times a year, but they don't fly enough to hit the silver type status. So they're not quite at the top there in the status level, but they're not a nobody either. They're doing a couple of flights, so they're worth something to the industry. And that sort of universe of people is probably about 50% of people that fly. And so how do they get more of these people into the ecosystem? How do they move these folks from flying one airline to another, because they don't really have a loyalty there. They don't have they do, but they don't have a status. They don't have a silver or gold status to lock them in, which is very effective for airlines. And so what's the mechanism? What's the offer? What's the promotion? What's the whatever? What does it take to get these people to open their eyes and go, you know what? This was Frontier Airlines, by the way. What is the CEO on a United flight? We'll get to that. How do they convince people to fly Frontier versus another carrier when ultimately it ends up being cheaper and better value when you fly these low cost airlines in a lot of cases anyway. So it was about what he was just trying to just back and forth, because you think if you work for an airline, you're in management, you're in this box every day, you're in this bubble, and suddenly you got me who's not in this bubble for the first time in a long time. You get to bounce these ideas off a fresh wall for once. And that's exactly what it was. And his background, he's marketing. And so obviously he obsessed with that already. And so it just created this fabulous conversation where you could sort of brainstorm, I guess, like just have a real sort of open, transparent conversation with someone he knows, but, can help him at the same time. And it was just really, really fabulous.
I hope that converted to a marketing meeting or a meeting with his team afterwards, or a call at least.
My friend,
it's a sales deal. It's a deal.
The next day, I think 3 days later, we've got a signed contract. I'm talking 40-page agreement, signed contract.
Oh, you got a deal.
We got a pretty significant.
You don't have to declare details. Just a deal will do, or a conversation. Wow.
Well, it gets better. There was a deal, and then we brought in a lot of resources. And part of us being a startup is we're very agile and we can do things very quickly. And so we actually launched something 3 days ago with them.
That's amazing.
Just Google.
That's such a good story. No, the thing is, our audience, Mark, these are authors, entrepreneurs, coaches, corporate leaders, and they'll be listening to this and think, wow, that's a dream serendipitous event. The challenge is I can't manufacture that. I can't be sort of flying around on planes like day in, day out, hoping I luck out next to the airline CEO. I mean, the chances of that, it's a lottery, isn't it? So how do you go about in the day-to-day building your tribe and your personal brand as that guy? What are the mechanics of it? What works for you? Because, I know we were talking off air, you were going to an industry event as well. That's a fantastic opportunity. I'm sure people are, there are events in every industry, expos, conferences where you can go and network. But these are sort of, probably less than 5-10% of our time. What's working for you in like getting out there, building your authority as the loyalty guy?
There's a few things that work for me and our brand. One is LinkedIn, obviously, is a huge social influence tool for this kind of thing. And on LinkedIn, I post things about my life, about my travel. I'll post pictures of being in the plane and stuff. And a lot of it is, when I fly, I like to overanalyze things like, hey, they could do this better. And what about this? And this works because of this. And I'm just a normal guy. I'm a frequent flyer. I have been for 20 years. I've had status with many airlines in that time. And loosely the logic is this: if I can start solving my own problems in the travel industry, then that's solving it for millions of other people. Because I totally overanalyze the heck out of this stuff. So I put a lot of this online, and when people read it, they resonate with it because it is their problem as well. They're like, gee, I wish, yeah, he's right. I wish that. and it comes across as a little edgy sometimes, like because you're a little bit out. They're not quite out there, you know. It creates interesting conversations, I will say.
Well, it's not moderated, is it? I mean, in the sense, if you were a brand, a large organization, and you had a Marcom's PR department, they'd be asking you to tone that down a little bit. You know, you're not being outright obnoxious or controversial, but you're saying what you feel, and you're speaking for people in your following, right, in your tribe. And that's what resonates. Because I see on your posts, you get like, you know, some of your posts get well over 100 likes. There's a lot of engagement in there. So you're actually, you know, you're saying from the heart what you believe in.
Correct. It's you're right. It's from the heart. It's genuine. It's exactly what people are thinking a lot of folks don't want to say. And because of that, it's not scripted PR corporate nonsense, which I don't know about you guys, but if I start reading or hearing PR stuff, I tune out instantly. I instantly think it's fake. There's lies here. Can't trust it. I want to hear the genuine story. I want to hear someone saying, you know what, this part is good, but this bit, you know, is not great. I resonate with that. And I feel there's a lot of folks out there, especially travelers, that sort of can connect more on that, because it's more of a story. It's less of a, you know, 18 people have gone through and I can't say that in press release.
No. Well, people, you're talking about you're talking about situations that people are actually been in, right? You know, when you're posting recently about like your walk-on impression of going onto a plane, or your first impressions about a seat, for example. These kind of things are important, and everybody kind of resonates with that. So that's real human stories, and I feel that is key to building your following in your tribe, is because you're giving people a voice. Like, people might not have the platform to be able to voice their discontent or their feelings about, or even their support for a brand in normal channels. So you are that platform in many ways.
You're right. And we work with a lot of airlines, and most people, especially management airlines, are not customers of their own product. They're not out there spending thousands of dollars when they fly. They're on staff fares. They're $100 business class around the world kind of thing. Their experience versus yours and mine is very, very different in terms of how they book a ticket, when they check in, when they fly. You know, they're not earning frequent flyer points. They don't need the credit card. You and we do. We need that stuff to get free flights. And so it's just disconnect. They're really smart people, but they're just disconnected from the customer a lot of time, which means when decision-making process comes along, they're relying on focus groups and things like that. Whereas if you just look at your customers and what they're talking about, which is, you know, largely where I come in as well. You know, I'm just trying to be the voice of the average traveler that just wants a great experience, bring a bit of that magic back to travel again. Because, you know, we've all got that memory in our mind when we were a kid, the first time we went on a plane, like, this is fucking magical, you know, got some little candy, got a little coloring book, whatever it was. You know, there was something special about it.
It's an adventure.
You can't quite put your finger on it. Exactly. And how do we bring that back to adults that travel these days? How do we bring that feeling back to travel again? And I feel there's a lot of things that airlines could be doing around the space. And so I'm just there's one little piece of that I can shine a light on and brighten up the day of a bunch of people. And that's what we're trying to do.
Love it. Coming up, we have some more magic and splendor this morning for you. Stick around, Mark, because I would like to introduce you to the guests coming onto the show very shortly. We've got Bethany Inez, the founder of Splendor, and Dan Cockerell, who will bring a little bit of magic from the Magic Kingdom today as well. So I'm looking forward to that. Mark, LinkedIn works for you. What else works for you? Any other tips that you can share with the listeners that has been working for you, for helping you in building effectively what is a B2B brand? What are your quick takeaways?
Events. Actually, promoting that you're going to be at events or have been to events. So the event itself is the hygiene factor. You've got to go just because you got to go. You can speak, awesome. But promoting that you're going to events, I've had a lot of success with that, or sponsoring events. That does really well, because then you get more hits at the same sort of bit of content over and over and over and over. So that's worked very well.
Yeah, events are a good one. Do you get people come up to you at events and say, "Oh, I've seen you somewhere. I know you. You're that guy." Have you got to that stage yet, or is it a bit more low key in the airline?
I've had a few. I had a few of these. I had one a few years ago at an event in Singapore where some gentleman I was complaining about one of their stands, and I was like, oh, this is a pretty shitty product. And he's like, oh, turns out it was his thing, right?
Yeah.
And he's like, who are you? It's like, oh, Mark, I see your stuff on LinkedIn. I'm like, who are you?
Yeah, it's a small world. Yeah.
Exactly. So I've had a few of these moments. They're pretty they feel pretty good, I will say.
I've had a few as well. I mean, in the early days of podcasting, before podcasting really blew up, when I was doing Asia Tech podcasts as an example, I had people stop me at events, and I had somebody even stop me in the middle of the road once, which was really bizarre in Japan. And they just stopped me and grabbed me and say, oh, you're that guy. You're that podcast guy. And it was funny because like I did a podcast. I didn't have any, in those days, there wasn't a video element to it. So how they knew, I don't know. But he knew everything about me, my backstory, my life, like where I had traveled, I'd sold a business, traveled the world. He knew all that stuff. So it's funny, like, when you kind of go to events, we're really it's a level playing field for most people. They go really as consumers. But if you are able to create a brand and tell people about it, like you say, beforehand, and build that up, you can get so much more out of an event, because these events tend to be very chaotic, very fluid. Meetings get moved around a lot. People that you said you would meet are not there. They're doing something else. They're off-site. So if you can make full use of that and, prime the pump of the tribe, if you like, before you go to an event, that's extremely powerful. Coming up, we have Bethany Inez, founder of Splendor. And I want to learn a little bit, firstly, about what Bethany does, but also, what was the backstory to it and how that journey has been for her in building her brand and her business. Mark, stick around, because I'd like you to meet our guests coming on. We'll have a chat about loyalty and brand building and tribes today. Bethany, I'm looking forward to welcoming her to the show. Let's bring Bethany Inez on. Hey, Bethany, welcome to Authority Live. How are you doing?
I'm well, thank you. Thanks for having me on. How are you?
Yeah, very good. What part of the world do you join us from?
I am in Byron Bay in Australia.
Nice. Is that where you're from originally?
No, I only moved here almost a year ago, but I think I found heaven on earth. It is absolutely stunning here. So have you ever visited?
Yeah. I've done all the way from right at the top in Cairns all the way down. So it was a bit of a long journey. I didn't realize how long it was actually until I got there and nearly ran out of fuel on the way. But it's a beautiful part of the world for sure. Welcome, and tell us a little bit about Splendor. What's going on? How long have you been building this, and how's the journey been for you?
Yeah, beautiful. So I have been life coaching for about 3 years now, and mostly have been in the Kidneys transformation program that we have. However, there was just so much bubbling out of me. Like, as I was coaching people, I was getting more and more ideas for ways to support people. And so at the beginning of May, Splendor was born. So it's very new. We've just launched with 5 different programs to support people with. As far as like how this has been coming, I think I've been working up to this my whole life. I think this has been the accumulation of all of my life lessons and all of my training to get to this point. So.
Nice. It's good when that comes together. What's the meaning of Splendor? I mean, I know what the word means, but what's the relevance of it to what you're doing?
Yeah. So what I'm really working on is bringing people back into their authentic self. And, to understand that we each have some splendor that is unique to us that we can connect in with and then reveal that to the world. I think a lot of people are focused, the majority of humanity is focused on what everyone else thinks of them and how to fit in with everyone else. And, you're talking about tribe here. It's such a core part of us that we're wanting to fit in with the tribe. And I guess, there's so much work that I'm doing to actually disconnect from that element to come back into yourself and then find your tribe from that space.
Who are your tribe then? Who are typically the people that join your programs? If without actually naming names, what are their profiles? What are their backgrounds? What are their pain points?
Yeah. So, anyone who really feels stuck in their life, anyone who's not able to create the life that they actually want. So many of my programs are putting people back in the driver's seat of their own life and being able to consciously create what they want. So anyone who feels like there's a gap in their life in whatever area, that they're able to do that.
Does that found particularly in an age group, a demographic, or is it everybody?
I mean, we serve everybody, right? Like we have probably the 20 to 45-year-old age group is the majority at the moment. But we're also very new, right? Like we're sort of in that stage of building the tribe and expanding that. We do lean towards women, but that's just organically happened. We absolutely coach men and bring them into the programs as well.
Well, what is it in the last few years that's really changed? What keeps them up at night? What is the frustrations that people can't fix in that group? I mean, you know, the need for finding purpose has been around since the beginning of human history. But what is it that's changed in the last couple of years when people come to you and say, Bethany, you know, and they reel off a list of symptoms? What is happening now that maybe wouldn't have been around 10 years ago?
Look, the common theme across all of my offerings, and I think the thing that people get the most out of, is how we work to connect them back to their true self. Like everyone has that battle going on within them. And I think you've got religions and cultures and all sorts of people trying to describe what it is. I personally describe it as that battle between your ego and your true self, or between fear and love. And I think we've become so disconnected from listening to our true self and how to be guided by our intuition, what it actually is when it activates within us. And so there's this craving for coming back home to that. And so, you know, as much as I've got different topics, like I have a program that's supporting people to release weight, another one on manifestation, another one on like core areas of their life, what's underneath all of them is connecting them back, that they need to know the difference between those voices, win that battle within their mind, and actually be guided by their intuition.
What I'm really interested in is like, and I'm sure the listeners would be curious about this, is the actual mechanics, if I can use such a crude word for splendor, about how you actually get customers. You know, how does that acquisition process work? Because I'm sure there are coaches out there, and probably top of every coach's concerns right now is, how do I get clients? How do I grow my business? Because, you know, you're not working, and it's the same with Mark as well, you're not working for a large corporate brand where you've got extensive marketing budgets. It's really about you and maybe a small team of people and the stories that you tell. What works for you? How are you best acquiring customers right now? And if people are in a similar situation to you listening, what advice would you give to them?
Yeah, it's definitely difficult as a life coach, because we offer something that basically everyone needs, but no one knows they need, right? Like the few know that they actually need it. So we've got to break down that barrier with people. Up until this point, like the 3 years, I've literally just been word of mouth. And it's worked perfectly for 3 years in that way. You know, as we've rebranded into Splendor, there's a need to do different strategies right now. So I'm definitely working on, getting my vibe out there more so that people can feel comfortable about.
How do you do that? How do you get your vibe out there? Because that sounds a bit personal as well, isn't it? Like, you know, oh, will people like my vibe? Because it's not like your brand, it's you, isn't it, that they're judging now?
100%. And that definitely plays on your mind, right? It's like you've got to, I'm teaching people how to be authentic. So I've just got to show up as me and
right.
show up as me. Definitely getting more active on social media, doing podcasts like this, doing, just going to events and speaking at events, and just really getting a chance for people to feel what it's like to be in my energy, knowing would I want that for myself.
I want to bring Mark back in if we can, because I want to ask all the guests this. The question that comes up a lot from the audience as well, and the listeners and people in my network, especially if you're at a certain, let's put it, a certain age. Let's if you're on the wrong side of 35, maybe you've got, 10, 15 years of experience. It might even affect younger people as well. But let's say you are not at the beginning of your careers. You have experience. You're maybe striking out, making a path for yourself alone, building your own brand, building your own business. This issue comes up time and time again, imposter syndrome. And it's an issue which is a stumbling block. It may not manifest, but maybe people don't know the name of it. But there is this feeling, you know, Bethany, you talked about your own vibe. Mark, I know you're out there really, vulnerable as well, putting yourself out there. Have you ever felt the imposter syndrome? When is it manifested? And I guess for the listeners as well, they want to know, like, how has that, I mean, obviously it's not fatal, so you're still here to tell the story, but how have you got over that?
I mean, for me, it's
Yeah, Mark.
there's a kind of a opposites here. So I screw up a lot, quite a lot actually. I get a lot of stuff wrong, and I feel like I'm out of my depth in a lot of situations. But those situations that they're a bit less and less frequent. And what I found more and more frequently, I find I'm kind of what I'll call, Bethany, like this in my power, or in my zone, or in state of flow. And because I'm in that state more often, when you feel like imposter syndrome, that's just less and less. And so it's actually pretty irrelevant these days. Like you still feel it, you're still in positions where it kind of happens. But there's just more of the goodness, and the more of the goodness kind of outweighs what you don't want, which is, feeling like, do I belong here? Do I not? Am I out of my depth here? Can I really have this conversation? And, when you weigh it up, it's like, well, it doesn't really matter, does it? Because I'm going to get more of it right than wrong. Therefore, everything's good.
What about you, Bethany? Have you ever felt the imposter syndrome doing what you're doing? Have you ever sort of done a podcast or a presentation and you thought, I feel a bit nervous? How does that sort of manifest for you?
Yeah. Look, I mean, I think when it was marketing things that I was still working on, right? Like I was marketing a weight loss program where I was still like, I still want to release weight. And so what really landed for me was recognizing how much that was my ego just chattering away and trying to distract me, and recognizing that, like, for my industry, we're never done. Like there's never a point we get to that we never can do better with our body, or better with manifesting, or better with creating our life. And so when I recognize it's like there's no end point for me to be at to then teach from, I'm just teaching and showing my journey so that people can understand how to go through the movements themselves, that all faded away. So yeah, it's now there's just no barriers on it anymore once I move into that.
What you're doing, Bethany, and what Mark is doing as well, is really sharing your journeys. I think this has come up a few times, isn't it? How important that is. I know, Mark, you talk about it with your social media posts, and Bethany, you're very much doing that very openly as well. This idea of sharing your journey, and it's not trying to get anywhere. It is the journey, isn't it? Rather than the destination. And people can love it or leave it. And it's out there. And if you like it, well, actually, probably a lot of people love it. That's the point, isn't it? Is that maybe they don't resonate with your journey. They see you posting on social media and think, no, that's not me. But those people, that 10% that really do get it, they're the ones that say, yeah, I feel part of this journey now. I want to join you. I want to come on this journey with you. I want to follow you. I'm part of your band of merry adventurers, like in all good myth. Those are the journeys that we put out there, rather than in the very traditional way about brand building and building tribes, the done product. Here you go, this is the product, like, you're going to buy it or not. It's very different the way that we need to build tribes now and build followings. And this idea of journey, I think, is such an important part of it, creating that magic, which really brings us into what I wanted to talk about with the next guest. Coming up, we have a special guest who is joining us, well, from many years in the Magic Kingdom. So we've gone from status to splendor to a bit of magic, but I think magic underpins all of this. We've got a quote. I want to bring in, before we bring in Dan, let's bring in Seth once again, Seth Godin. We've got a quote here. If we can bring that up on the screen, I think this is kind of relevant to what we're talking about here. Let's bring in this quote. Seth Godin, the marketing guru and author, wrote many books, Purple Cow being one, Tribes being another one. People do not buy goods and services. They buy relations, stories, and magic. How important is this? People don't buy stuff. They buy what stuff does for them. So whatever you're selling, so the audience out there, whatever you're selling, you've got to understand that there's a product that you sell, and there is this story around the product, which is far more important. Because when it's about the product itself, you're in the business of commodity. You're in the business of, comparing your product to the next guy. And then, it's really down to the physical nature of what you sell. You may get clients or potential leads that say, oh, well, can I just take this part of what you're doing? Or can I break this down? And, oh, I looked at this guy's website and it's cheaper here. That's when you're in the commodity game. The issue is getting that conversation further upstream, talking about the story. Because if you can get people bought into the story and your journey, then when it comes to the sales conversation. They're already educated about what you do, and they're bought into what you're trying to do as well. Let's bring in Dan Cockerell, if we can, from many different sources. Dan, welcome to the show.
Hey, Graham, how are you?
Looks like you're on the move, talking about journeys. Where are you, sir?
I'm in Boulder, Colorado, and I just finished a 1-hour touch rugby training with some young lads. So if I have a heart attack while I'm talking to you, I'm on the corner of Mapleton and 28th Street.
All right, we've made a note for the emergency services. Hopefully that won't happen. But thank you for joining us today, Dan. Looking forward to getting into your work, but also introducing you to our guests here as well. We've been talking, don't know if you caught any of that off air, we've been talking about loyalty in airlines. We've been talking about splendor, building tribes. This is really in your ballpark, isn't it? 26 years in the Magic Kingdom. You must have learned a little.
26 years with the Walt Disney Company. Started out parking cars at Epcot in Florida, spent 5 years at Disneyland Paris, and then another 21 years at Walt Disney World in Florida. And I finished up my career as vice president of the Magic Kingdom. I left in 2018. And, the guests, y'all have been great. I really enjoyed the conversation, and you all are right on. A big piece for me, leaving Disney was purpose. 26 years was a great career, learned a lot, but it was time for freedom and simplicity. So I think we go through seasons of our life and got to take some risks. But I had a incredible education working for Disney for so long.
Wonderful. What a great brand as well. What is it that you know about Disney that most people don't know? What is it that you have on the inside juice on Disney and the Magic Kingdom that the average consumer doesn't even appreciate?
Wow, great question. Well, I'll start out, and I think one of the things that I really learned in my career at Disney is everything is done with intent. Nothing is done by accident. Everything is planned. What you see, what you smell, what you touch, what you hear, everything is about tapping into those emotional connections, and just making sure everything feels right. Everything makes sense. And I think, Mark was talking about it earlier. This idea of getting into your customers, your guests, as we call them at Disney, get into their shoes and see the experience from their point of view. It is such a common sense, simple thing to do, and done so infrequently, I think, by a lot of senior executives. And that was a really important piece at Disney. It's everyone there gets into the operation. The support areas work at least 7 days a year during the holidays in the operation. I would spend time with once a month. I would visit the Magic Kingdom as a guest and buy a park ticket and go through the turnstiles and go into the fast food locations and buy merchandise. And it's a really important piece. So I think the word we use when we design experiences is called empathy, right? If you're empathetic, you're putting yourself in your customer's shoes. And after a day as a guest of the Magic Kingdom, I would walk away with 50 things that we're doing great and 50 things we got to change tomorrow. Because, when you're the vice president of the Magic Kingdom, you don't wait in queue lines for the attractions. You go to whatever you want, whenever you want, because you're in charge. But that's not where, my 20 million guests are in those queue lines. And so you better experience it. So I think Mark had a great point that, when you run something, you're not seeing it from the same point of view as your guests and your employees. So that is, I'll say, two areas. I don't know if that's a secret, but Disney focuses on the employees first, making sure we hire the right people, we have the right training programs, we take care of them, we respect them, we listen to them, we get them engaged and involved in improving the operation and having a voice. And then they take care of the customers, and the customers come back. Intent to return goes up, intent to recommend goes up, and that's the lifeblood of every company, return business and great reputation.
Tell me something about Disney, Dan, that I want to know if it's true from somebody who should know as an expert. Is this true? If, for example, Woody, the character Woody, was walking, I don't know what kingdom, what area of the world would he be in? He would be in the Wild West or something. But if he was walking through the Magic Kingdom, he wouldn't walk through the Epcot Center. Everybody's always in character. And if, for example, you asked Snow White.
Yep.
You know, can you take a photo with my iPhone? She would say, what's an iPhone? Is that true, or is that anecdotal? What's the reality? Is it something that's trained into them?
I'll tell you, it's in between. When Walt Disney built Disneyland in 1955, you know, he and his team were animators. They were movie people. Theme parks did not exist. He was the creator of the theme park. Carnivals existed, but his idea was, I want to build a 3-dimensional movie. I want to build a show. And so all the language we use at Disney, everyone is in the show. You're either on stage or backstage. If you're on stage, you have your name tag on, you're in character. If you're in Frontierland, you say, howdy, partner. If you're in Tomorrowland, you say, hello, space traveler. Everything is about the show, and you put on that show every day. Everyone has their lines and their script, and they know what they can do. And, you know, they obviously, you can do things kind of spontaneously and be authentic, but it's really important that we create these immersive experiences, and everything talks to that, and it just all makes sense, and it all connects. And so to your point, you know, employees should not have iPhones out when they're on stage. That's not allowed. It's not part of the show. We really drill that in at the beginning, because that's a huge differentiator for, I think, the Disney theme parks, is the attention to detail. And all those details add up to an experience that's really hard to duplicate.
How do you like take a bit of that magic and make it work for you, Dan, in your personal brand? Because now you have moved, you know, you've graduated from the Magic Kingdom. You're doing your own thing. You've got a great book out there, which has a lot of good reviews on Amazon, by the way. We'll put details in the show notes for people who want to go and check out about culture in the Magic Kingdom. How does it work for you? How do you, I mean, obviously you've got that Disney brand that opens doors, but you know, there's a lot of competition now for, you know, people's meetings and people's time. How does it work for you? What, you know, I'm thinking about the listeners who are authors, coaches, executives, corporate leaders, you know, who want to build a personal brand, want to build a tribe. How can they learn a bit from Dan?
Yeah, so I'll take you through something we talk about, the chain of excellence, and it's how Walt Disney World operates. And I'll kind of run it through how we apply it to our business. My wife Valerie and I, you know, the chain of excellence. The result is intent to return, intent to recommend. Getting people to, once you've charged them whatever you're going to charge them for your product or service, to think, you know what, that was a great value, and that's something Disney focuses on, is value. Because if we focused on price, no one thinks it's reasonable. It's incredibly expensive. But if you can focus on value, people say, you know what, I don't like spending all that money, but boy, I couldn't get that experience anywhere else. And then intent to recommend, you know, word of mouth. And so in the 5 years since we have started our company, I would say 99% of our business has come through people we know or have met or have seen us in speeches and get referrals. I every time I hear about, you know, search engine optimization and a lot of the social media things, you absolutely have to have a voice online. You can't just be silent. But the best customers I have and the repeat and the ones that are connected is someone talked to someone and recommended and referred us. And that's just a reality. So we focus on, every time we deal with a client, we're thinking to ourselves, we have to just think of every detail, over deliver, give them a bunch of things that they weren't expecting to have. And so deliver what they paid for. If you hire us for a keynote speech or a workshop or whatever we're going to give you, we're going to be clear. We're going to make sure we think about all the details. We're going to be on time. We are going to be reliable. We're going to do everything we said we're going to do. We're going to be easy to work with. And that is kind of an entry point. And then beyond that is, okay, what else are you going to do? So if, you know, when someone hires me for a keynote, after they hire me, I say, look, I can come in the night before. I can meet any of your VIPs you want me to spend time with and have dinner. The day of the speech, if you'd like me to meet some people and, you know, show some clients some extra love, I'd be happy to do that. We spend a lot of time in Brazil. And so when we go there, you know, in Brazil, people love photos. Instagram and social media is like 10x the United States. So when I get there after a keynote, I'll stand there and take as many pictures with as many people and for as long as it takes. And, the organizers always say, well, Dan, you've been here an hour and a half. Do you want to go now? I said, no, people are waiting. They want to do this. And I want to make sure we leave everyone very happy. So, this idea of you're paying me, I'm going to come in, do my speech and slip out the back door because I don't want to deal with people. That's not why people remember you. And that's not why people make that emotional connection. And I want people to say, you know what, Dan and Valerie were great to work with. They took care of us. They took care of the details. They made sure we had a great event. And so they start to trust you. I think the tough thing for entrepreneurs is getting the first clients. That's always the challenging part. How do I get the first person to hire me? And we had the same issue when we left 5 years ago. How do we find someone to hire us? And, we bring our credentials with us, and that helps a lot, being at Disney. But once you get that first client, anytime anyone decides, if you're lucky enough to have them buy your product or service, you have to treat them like gold, because they are the ones that can go talk about you, come back and buy more. And we're so lucky to get them. And so we are very, we raise the bar really high, and we just don't take for granted. Every time we get a client or a workshop or an event, we never take it for granted. We make sure that they walk away saying, wow, we loved working with them. And, we're going to look for other opportunities.
Yeah, client access is so important. Let's round up then. You've been watching Authority Live, everybody. Let's round up with a few takeaways from all of our guests today. What have they learned from each other? Let's start with you, Mark. You were first on the show, and let's bring in Mark. What have you learned from our guest today you think you could share that you'd like to employ maybe or use in your business, something you'd like to focus, maybe a little nudge to focus a bit more on in what you do? I've certainly got a few takeaways, which I'll share after this. Let's unmute Mark.
My bad. Biggest takeaway, I think, is I could listen to Dan all day. He's pretty dreamy, and he's talking, and I can see why he's keynoting at events and obviously getting paid the big bucks for it. So I think I could learn a thing or two there. But I think this is a evolving thing where we always are all continuously learning and finding new ways to do things, new ways to improve our businesses, which translates into people we work with, helping them and their clients. And ultimately, I think that's what we should be striving for, is that end customer, the end consumer, whoever is consuming this content or benefiting from what we do, and in whatever that looks like. And for me, I think my takeaway here is I'm learning from some other industry experts here.
Yeah, there's a great line. I think it might even be Seth Godin. I've done too much Seth Godin today, but I think it's certainly, in place when we talk about tribes. He says retention is the new acquisition. How true that is in building our businesses, right? That if you can hold on to clients, they're going to bring in new clients. And, finding ways to delight those existing clients is, rather than constantly acquiring. Obviously, you've got to acquire, but those existing clients will bring in clients for you, whether it's their own stories that people see as client success or through referral as well, or the social proof. Bethany, what about yourself? What have you got for takeaways from today listening to Mark and Dan? You're on mute, by the way.
Well, I'm first going to just ditto Mark there with Dan. I was just so drawn into everything you were saying there, Dan. So thank you for your share. Yeah, definitely a reminder in the almost, I call it the mystery shopping thing, going in and experiencing your own business. And of course, when I am the business, it's got my brain going about how to put more people in ways to give me that kind of feedback that's more specific than what your client can give you, if that makes sense. And definitely with picking up with Mark there, just about even inspired to show even more of just what it's like in the day of the life kind of thing, to be that kind of level of connection with people. So.
Yeah, Bethany, I need to do more of that. I think the showcasing more, or not even the word showcasing, that's too grand, isn't it? Really just doing more of the journey. This is what's happening. This is what's not working. These are the mistakes. These are what I've learned. And just being human about it, rather than this is what I'm producing. This is my product. This is my service. I think that's sort of the default that I fall back into, which is kind of the norm, isn't it, for most people? I want to share more about the journey. This is what we've been on. This is what we're building. This is the promised land of what we're pitching and where we're going. So today's been a reminder for me in that, going back to that, being a bit more vulnerable, being a bit more human in that. And let's see what I can produce in the next week in terms of my social media posts. Please call me out on this if I don't need a bit of a reminder. Dan, yourself, thanks for joining us and waiting around for the last slot today. Last but not least, what have you learned from the guest today?
Yeah, well, something Bethany was hitting on kind of sparked something I talk about often. Getting to figure out kind of, I don't know if she said what your purpose is, but kind of who you are. The world today, I think social media is so unhealthy. It's a great communication tool, and if it's used for that, is great. But this idea that we're always connected, we're comparing everybody's stories with our own. It's an unhealthy thing. It used to be this idea, let's keep up with the Joneses, right? You can see your next door neighbor, and if they get a new car, well, why aren't we catching up with them? But now the problem is there's the Joneses, there's millions of people. You don't even know people, and you feel bad because you don't have this life they have. So I think pulling back, getting more simplicity is incredibly important. And I'll come back to what Mark said about just, and I think Bethany just mentioned it, connecting. And I think the reason people don't truly connect is, they think they're connecting on these very superficial ways. And they just don't, you got to put the time in. There's no efficient way to go out and be a customer or be with your employees and really find out what's going on. You got to put your ego away. You have to find time to do it. And you have to really recognize as a leader that it's going to create value. And it's going to be you got to go out there and be genuine and authentic. And that's hard because these businesses are so complicated today. I don't think the CEOs even quite understand how they run, but they still have to make these promises. So I think being human and getting in front of everyone is incredibly important. We can't lose that because that's what, you've been talking about tribes. That's what makes us humans, these connection points. And we have to have a basic human respect for people and the incredibly hard jobs they're doing.
Yeah. And being a leader means really today just standing up, not necessarily having a job title or a qualification. It means who's the person that wants to stand up and lead this tribe? And it's you. If you want to be the B2B whatever guy, if you want to be the loyalty guy, then all you have to do is stand up and start talking about it. If you want to be, whatever your tribe is, you just have to be the one that stands up. And that requires a little bit of overcoming fear. Or not necessarily overcoming, but just getting comfortable with it. Because I think one thing we learned, we talked about the imposter syndrome earlier today, is that it never goes away. You never not get scared or a little bit nervous doing these speeches, whether it's a podcast. I mean, I've done, 2,000 podcasts in my time now. And I always get a little bit nervous. And I know that when those nerves go away, that's the day I need to stop because it doesn't mean anything. It's not important enough. And so I think one of the challenges I feel in people building tribes and the imposter syndrome is that they feel that because they feel nervous when they get up and they get on stage or they get on a podcast, then somehow that's a negative sign that they're not yet there yet. They're not good enough yet. And we talked about the comparison part. I'm not as good as Seth Godin. I'm not as good as Tony Robbins when it comes to presentations or whoever it may be. But that's not the point, is it? If you're feeling these feelings, it means that what you're doing matters enough to people that you should be doing it. And therefore, that's a good sign. It's never going to go away. It's just practice. Like Mark says, the more you do it, the more you actually get very comfortable with that feeling. You've been watching Authority Live. My name's Graham Brown. I've been joined by some wonderful guests today. Hopefully a part of the Authority Tribe now. We had Mark, Bethany, and Dan. Details will all go in the show notes. So hopefully you, if you're watching on YouTube in the archive or listening to us on Spotify, not only will you follow this journey with us, but you also reach out to these guests if you feel that their message resonated with you and you would like to learn more about them. We'll put the details of them on LinkedIn as well if you'd like to connect with them. Hey folks, Mark, Bethany, Dan, really enjoyed having you on this episode of Authority Live today. We'd love to have you back on a future episode and continue this journey and wherever it may take us on the journey into understanding what authority is and what tribe building is as well and how you can build a following. Thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciated that. If you enjoyed this journey as well, please check us out on all of those platforms and we'll see you again next week.
Thank you, Graham.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.